This is part two of the Catch More Fish, Trout and Rivers fly selection. Understanding flies can be a daunting task. There are thousands and thousands of patterns. What I've done is get to know the prominent locals, the local fly fishing celebrities, if you will, and they develop their own patterns specific to that area. I've done a lot of fishing in Colorado. A name that comes to mind is Charlie Craven or Landon Mayer. Both of those gentlemen have developed very popular fly patterns that match their style of fishing. It's not just the United States, too. There are amazing fly tyers all over the world. Spanish style dry flies or French nymphing patterns, New Zealand style flies. Getting to know all of them and why those locals fish those flies and what the purpose is will help you formulate a game plan when you're on the river. This is a fishing report from the Henry's Fork Angler that's written by Mike Lawson. Mike Lawson is a very well-known angler in that area, and he writes about the Henry's Fork. And at the bottom, he mentions his favorite flies for this stretch of water. I imagine it's a slower stretch because he suggests a Visidun, a hackle stacker, and a no hackle. And these are all very slim profile mayfly patterns. If you continue down, he talks about the South Fork and he mentions the riffles. He suggests a chubby. A chubby is a popular dry fly made of foam. It's often used as an indicator or the lead fly in a hopper dropper rig. And he suggests a beadhead Frenchie, a two-bit hooker, or a beadhead pheasant tail. And those are all very heavy nymphs, heavy mayfly nymphs. So you know the water in this area is moving. And in these conditions, you would never fish those patterns he suggested or the Henry's Fork section. He also suggests fishing some streamers. But again, in moving water, the fish might be more keen to hit a streamer, but you'd never fish that streamer in the Henry's Fork section. We all carry too many flies. The best anglers I know cycle through maybe 6 patterns a day, 3 or 4 dries, a couple of nymphs, but we're all guilty of carrying way too many flies. The adage is size, shape, color, size being the most important, and then the shape, what prominent features stand out, whether it's legs, wing, antenna, and then the color of the fly. I don't think we give the color enough credit. I agree it should be third in importance from size and shape, but I generally would try to match the natural color of the insect or the food item. So you get to the river and you're thinking, what should I tie on first? It starts with your leader. I've seen some pretty creative leader setups. I started catching more fish when I cut that leader, that looped end of the fly line and perfection loop, and learned how to tie a nail knot. The butt section of the leader is very important. The store-bought tapered leaders, those butt sections are quite thick and they create a lot of drag. If you're doing a lot of dry fly fishing, a thinner, longer butt section will help your presentation. But if you're nymphing, that heavier butt section will help you turn over a complicated nymph rig. I generally go a little bit thinner diameter for my leader. And if I'm having trouble casting, I adjust the cast accordingly. In terms of the pattern, what you should use, if you're completely clueless, know what the classic representations of a caddis and mayfly are if you're fishing dries, and vice versa, or maybe a stonefly, caddis, mayfly, stonefly. If you're nymphing, those classic patterns will give you a starting point. Understand the difference between a searching pattern and a specific pattern. You might search with an Adams dry fly, but if there's a specific mayfly hatch, let's say pale morning duns, you're going to want to switch to a pattern that's closer in color and size. The water conditions will dictate the size and style of fly you want to fish. A big dry fly made out of foam would be useful in a big western river like in Montana or Wyoming, but not practical in a spring creek. And that delicate pattern that you'd use for the spring creek wouldn't float high or long enough in that faster western river. Let the water condition kind of guide you on what fly to choose, and highlighting the strength of that particular fly design. When talking about the flies, it's all about the materials. It starts with the casting, and then after the casting, how it lands. Some materials are difficult to cast, like foam. Often foam will make the fly spin, whereas other materials are very enjoyable to cast. But during the presentation, every material will have a different landing and a different imprint on the water. And as an angler, you want to feel from that visual the confidence you have in that fly, how it's sitting in the water. Adding flash to flies is something I would do in tougher conditions. For example, summer and winter. In summer, the weather conditions can make it tough. And in winter, sometimes the fish need just a little extra incentive to activate. I personally like flies that have four materials or less, not for the purpose of tying. I just feel more confident with the simpler presentation. Every fly has a purpose. Every fly was designed for a specific situation. Understanding where you are, what you need, will tell you what fly is best for you. Let's take a look at some of these flies and how they're designed. This CDC ant is very simple, has a dubbing body, CDC wing, and a hackle. That's three materials. It's very clever because the white CDC is folded back, making it a little bit more visible, but the fish wouldn't be able to see that necessarily. So this is a very clever pattern. This biot comparadun has some hackle fibers for tail, a biot body, and a deer hair wing. Three materials. It's a very well designed pattern. Even this foam hopper, you have the foam on the body, rubber legs, deer hair wing, three materials. Well designed pattern. Here's a more complicated pattern. The original stimulator has an elk hair tail and wing, but here they've added rubber legs. They've added some crystal flash. It looks like they have floss around the body. And this wouldn't be my first choice if I needed a big high floating dry fly.